A single drop of blood on a torn designer shirt. The metallic clink of a silver lighter in a soundproof library. This isn't a boardroom negotiation, it's an execution. Cut to the Pierre Hotel ballroom. Celeste's knuckles turn bone white as she hides behind a stranger wrapped in Tom Ford oud wood. She thinks she's just avoiding the man who shattered her heart. She has no idea she just handed her soul to a monster with storm gray eyes. Watch the tragic descent of a quiet girl from Queens, who watches the man who ruined her dragged to the slaughter only to realize the hand resting protectively on her waist belongs to the devil himself. A
wave of pure panic crashed over Celeste, her grip strangling the stem of a champagne flute. Her knuckles were bone white against the ballroom's glittering chaos. Then she saw him, the architect of her downfall, sharing a laugh with the heiress who had usurped her life. Escape became an immediate imperative. Turning to the man beside her, a monolith in a tuxedo, she breathed, "Dance with me, please. My ex is here." She was oblivious that she had just solicited the city's most notorious phantom for aid. The ballroom was a dizzying tapestry of silk, diamonds, and bespoke tailoring. For the assembly, the gala was the season's pinnacle event. For Celeste Adams, it was merely a gilded cage mandated by her profession. As an appraiser, she was required to navigate the orbits of billionaires. Then a familiar chill settled over her. Sebastian Hayes. He was there, an arm possessively draped around Victoria Street James, the woman he had chosen 3 months prior. After deeming Celeste insufficient for his world, Celeste's breathing hitched. She saw Sebastian surveying the room with a self-satisfied smirk she knew intimately. He was hunting for her, poised to display his triumph. She had to vanish. Retreating, she collided with what felt like a wall of solid muscle. A strong hand clamped onto her arm, steadying her and saving her dress from her drink. "Careful," a deep voice resonated, both smooth and cold. Celeste turned, the apology on her lips dissolving as she met his gaze. The man was a study in lethal elegance. He stood an imposing 6'3", his broad shoulders eclipsing her view of the room. His jet-black hair was slicked back from features that seemed chiseled from marble. Yet it was his eyes, the precise gray of a brewing storm, that pierced through her defenses. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, adding a savage edge to his refined appearance. I am so deeply sorry," Celeste faltered, her pulse a frantic drumbeat. Before a reply could form, she saw him. Sebastian had found her. Sebastian's smirk intensified as he murmured to Victoria, and they began to advance. A primal dread seized Celeste. She could not endure their condescension, their whispered jests. Not tonight, not while she was utterly exposed. Propelled by pure instinct, Celeste invaded the stranger's personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and something sharper like ozone and steel. "Please dance with me," she whispered, her voice trembling with desperation. "My ex is watching." For an instant, his gray eyes registered surprise before curving into a slow, predatory smile. That smile should have been a clear signal to flee. "Is that a fact?" he purred, the sound a low vibration. "Please," she implored, her hand brushing the lapel of his suit. "Just for one song." Without a word, the man signaled a passing waiter, disposed of his drink, and coiled an arm around her waist. The latent power in his grip sent a shock through her. He drew her flush against him, steering her toward the dance floor as a ballad began. "Follow my lead," he commanded softly. Celeste could only comply. He moved with a predator's fluid grace, entirely at odds with the romantic melody. He did not merely dance. He commanded the space, compelling other couples to give them a wide berth. "You're trembling," he noted, his hand a scorching brand on the bare skin of her back. "I'm terrified," Celeste confessed, too weary for pretense. "He dismantled my life, and now he's here to gloat." The stranger's gaze flickered past her, his eyes turning to ice as he evaluated her approaching ex. "The blonde man and the imitation Armani?" A hysterical laugh escaped Celeste. "It's Tom Ford. But yes, that's Sebastian." "He has the look of a coward," the man declared, "and poor judgment for exchanging you for the skeleton on his arm." Celeste looked up at him, momentarily stunned by the raw compliment. "Who are you?" "A convenient solution," he answered, dipping her low just as Sebastian and Victoria arrived. "Celeste!" Sebastian's voice was deliberately loud, designed to create a spectacle. "I thought I might find you here." The stranger brought Celeste upright, his body forming a living shield, and leveled his gaze at Sebastian. The temperature around them seemed to plummet. Sebastian's arrogant smile wavered under that frigid, impassive stare. Victoria took an involuntary step back. "Sebastian?" Celeste managed, her voice thin. "I see you've found a replacement," Sebastian sneered, attempting to recover his bravado. His eyes raked over the stranger. "I don't think we've been introduced. Sebastian Hayes, of Hayes Capital." He extended a hand. The stranger simply stared at it as if it were something unclean. "The lady is otherwise engaged," the stranger said, his voice quiet. The absolute authority in his tone, however, was as sharp as a blade. It was not a request. It was a verdict. Sebastian let his hand fall, his face flushing with color. "Pardon me? I was speaking to my ex-girlfriend." "And that dialogue has concluded," the stranger countered, his gaze unwavering from Sebastian's. "Walk away, Mr. Hayes, before you forfeit the privilege of doing so." The threat's chilling power lay in its utter lack of emotion. Sebastian swallowed, his confidence utterly shattered. He gave Celeste a look laced with a newfound apprehension, grabbed Victoria's arm, and retreated hastily into the throng. Celeste was dumbfounded, looking at the man who still held her. What just happened? The stranger's dangerous smile reappeared. He released her, though the ghost of his touch lingered on her skin, merely providing some assistance, Celeste. He knew her name. She had never spoken it. Before she could question him, he gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. "Enjoy your evening. Do not waste your grief on a man who is already a phantom." With that cryptic farewell, he merged back into the crowd, leaving Celeste shaken. Monday morning was an ordeal of stale coffee and a profound sense of foreboding. Celeste sat at her desk, staring without seeing at a loupe and a collection of antique jewelry. She had not slept since the gala. Closing her eyes only conjured the memory of a powerful hand on her back and storm-gray eyes that looked at her as if she were prey. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Adams." Celeste looked up as Sarah, her caustically witty coworker, dropped a stack of folders onto her desk. "Just tired," Celeste lied. "Late night." "I'll bet," Sarah smirked, leaning closer. "The rumor is you were acquainted with the boogeyman himself. It's all anyone is talking about." Celeste frowned. "What are you talking about? He was just some man." Sarah's jaw fell. "Celeste, don't tell me you have no idea. You genuinely don't know who that was?" "No. Who was he? An actor? Some tech billionaire?" Before Sarah could elaborate, the main doors of the gallery were thrown open. The hushed, professional hum of the auction house ceased abruptly. Through her office window, Celeste watched 4 men in dark suits enter with purpose. They moved with the coordinated efficiency of a wolf pack, their eyes methodically scanning the room. These were not bodyguards. They were enforcers. Arthur Caldwell, her boss, emerged from his office, anxiously straightening his tie. Then a figure filled the doorway, and Celeste's breath caught in her throat. It was him, the man from the gala. Under the harsh fluorescent lighting, he seemed even more formidable. He was dressed in a flawless 3-piece suit that radiated wealth, his dark hair immaculately styled. He moved with a serene, deliberate power, oblivious to the palpable fear emanating from Arthur Caldwell. "Who is that?" Celeste whispered, unable to avert her gaze. Sarah's fingernails dug into her arm. "That is Deondre Falcone," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Head of the Falcone crime family, he runs half the ports, controls the city's illegal gaming, and who knows what else. He is the most powerful and feared man in New York, Celeste. He is the syndicate." The oxygen seemed to vacate Celeste's lungs. Deondre Falcone. The name was a whispered legend in the city, a dark tale the wealthy used to frighten one another, and she had draped herself all over him, demanded he dance with her. She had used a notorious crime lord as a social shield against her ex-boyfriend. "Oh my God," Celeste breathed. She recalled his chilling words to Sebastian. "Walk away while you still have the legs to do so." It had not been a mere threat. It was a statement of fact. "Miss Adams," Celeste started. Arthur Caldwell stood in her doorway, his face ashen and beaded with sweat. One of Deondre's men stood impassively at his side. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell," Celeste responded, rising on unsteady legs. "Mr. Falcone is waiting in the private viewing room," Caldwell squeaked, his voice tight with anxiety. "He has acquired a new estate and requires an immediate appraisal of its art collection. He specifically requested you." "Me?" Celeste's voice was barely audible. "But I'm just a junior appraiser. You manage all the high-profile clients." "I attempted to explain that," Caldwell hissed, dabbing his brow with a handkerchief. He insisted. "Said he admired your nerve at the gala. Celeste, I am begging you, do not refuse this man." The journey down the opulent hallway to the VIP room felt like a final walk. Caldwell pushed open the heavy door and then practically recoiled, not daring to cross the threshold himself. Deondre Falcone was observing the Manhattan skyline from a panoramic window. He was drinking scotch at 10 in the morning and did not turn as she entered. "Lock the door, Celeste," he commanded. The voice sent a familiar, chilling shock through her. She complied, the lock's click echoing with the finality of a tomb being sealed. She remained frozen in the center of the room, clutching her tablet like a protective ward. At last, Deondre turned. His stormy eyes met hers, and the ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You had no inkling of who I was that night," he observed. It was a statement, not a question. "No, Mr. Falcone, I did not." Celeste raised her chin, fighting to project a courage she did not feel as her legs trembled. "Had I known, I never would have." "Touched me?" he interjected, taking a single, deliberate step toward her. "Appointed me as your personal security. Used me to humiliate your pathetic former lover." A deep blush crept up Celeste's neck. "I am profoundly sorry. My behavior was inexcusable." Deondre halted, now mere inches from her. That opulent, woodsy scent enveloped her once more. "Offer no apology," That was the most thrilling 5 minutes I've experienced at those tedious functions in a decade. You possess a certain audacity, Celeste. I find that compelling. He moved to a leather armchair, gesturing for her to occupy the one opposite. I was direct with your superior. I've acquired a property in the Hamptons. Its previous owner amassed a significant collection of European art. I require a discerning eye to separate the genuine masterpieces from what must be incinerated. Incinerated? Celeste uttered, truly stunned. If it is a forgery, it is consumed by fire, Deondre stated with finality, lifting a glass to his lips. I tolerate no forgeries in my world, Celeste. Not in my collection, and not among my associates. You will report to the estate tomorrow. You are to be my exclusive consultant until the task is complete. Mr. Falcone, Celeste began, weighing her words with care. My schedule is currently filled with other commitments. I cannot simply abandon my obligations. Deondre's gaze sharpened almost imperceptibly. In an instant, the warmth evaporated from the room. As of this moment, you serve a single client. You sought a favor from me on Saturday. I honored it. In my world, a favor is a binding agreement, and all debts are eventually called due. He rose, signaling the conversation was over. He glided past her but paused at the door, his lips brushing near her ear. Pack for a week? He murmured. My driver will collect you at 8. The formidable iron gates of the Falcone estate receded like the maw of some metallic beast. The property sat on a secluded forested bluff in East Hampton, fortified by 10-foot stone barriers crowned with surveillance equipment. As the black escalade proceeded, Celeste gripped her handbag, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs. She had spent the night researching Deondre Falcone. The facts were sparse, eclipsed by whispers and dropped charges. Extortion, racketeering, financial cleansing, and rumors about how his rivals vanished. The man she had impulsively danced with was, in essence, the sovereign of the city's criminal empire. The driver, a hulking figure named Rocco, opened her door. Celeste stepped onto the gravel path, her eyes fixed on the immense Gothic Revival mansion. Miss Adams, a crisp voice called out. A severe-looking older woman in a simple black uniform descended the stone stairs. I am Mrs. Gable, the head of household. Mr. Falcone is occupied at the east wing. He instructed me to escort you to the library where the collection is housed. Celeste could only nod, trailing the woman through vast, echoing corridors of marble and dark timber. The stillness of the estate was profound and unnerving. It felt less like a residence and more like a meticulously preserved tomb. The library was a staggering sight. It was a 2-story cathedral of literature, redolent of aged paper and leather, with enormous bay windows that framed a churning sea. Canvases were everywhere, displayed on easels or leaning against the towering shelves. For the next 4 hours, she immersed herself in the work, letting it be a bulwark against the suffocating anxiety of her situation. She moved from piece to piece, identifying a breathtaking, authentic Modigliani, a questionable Rembrandt, and a sublime but fraudulent Vermeer. She was inspecting the chiaroscuro of a dark Caravaggio when the library doors burst open. Celeste jolted, nearly fumbling her magnifying lens. 2 of Deondre's enforcers were dragging a third man between them. The captive struggled, his attire in disarray, his face marred by a bloody gash over his eye. They deposited him unceremoniously on the Persian rug. Moments later, Deondre entered. He had shed his suit coat. His white dress shirt was unfastened at the collar, the sleeves rolled to reveal powerful forearms covered in elaborate dark ink. He was the embodiment of death. He was the monster of the whispers. Deondre's focus was absolute. He seemed oblivious to Celeste, who had retreated into the shadows behind a large terrestrial globe. "Please, Falcone, I swear," the man on the floor whimpered, his voice fracturing with terror. Celeste pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a scream. She recognized him. It was Sebastian. Her former lover was kneeling in a crime lord's study, weeping, his designer shirt stained with his own blood. Deondre approached Sebastian with a deliberate pace, his expression devoid of anger or any emotion. He produced a silver lighter, flicking it open and closed with a rhythmic metallic snap. "You are indebted to me for $3 million, Sebastian," Deondre said, his tone low, almost conversational. It was a calm lethality far more chilling than any shout. "Funds my organization entrusted to Hayes Capital for redistribution. My ledgers now indicate you've been diverting it to offshore havens for a new yacht and a diamond trinket for your latest conquest." The blood drained from Celeste's face. Sebastian had embezzled from the mob. He had defrauded Deondre Falcone to finance his lifestyle with Victoria. "I can recover it," Sebastian pleaded, scrambling backward until he collided with a heavy leather chair. I require an extension. The market turned. My assets are frozen." The strike was instantaneous, a predator's lunge. Deondre's hand shot out, seizing Sebastian by the throat and slamming his head against the chair. The clicking of the lighter ceased. "Do not dare insult my intelligence with such falsehood," Deondre hissed, the veneer of civility stripped away to reveal the beast beneath the bespoke tailoring. "I am aware of where every single cent was spent. You acquired a new vehicle with my capital. You fabricated a life you did not earn." "Deondre, I implore you," Sebastian gasped, his complexion darkening as the pressure intensified. "I will do anything. I can work to repay it." "You could not settle a $3 million debt in 10 lifetimes, you insignificant parasite," Deondre spat. He leaned closer, his voice a venomous whisper. "And the irony? You discarded a woman of true substance because her lineage was beneath you, only to steal from a monster to masquerade as a man of status." Celeste's universe ground to a halt. He was referring to her. He was aware. He knew everything. He had likely known every detail about her before she ever entered his orbit. With an expression of utter contempt, Deondre released Sebastian, who collapsed to the floor, desperately gulping for air. Deondre retrieved a crisp, white handkerchief from his pocket, wiping his hand with a cold, deliberate precision. "Escort him to the quiet room in the cellar," Deondre commanded, his gaze averted from the broken man. "Allow him to contemplate his debt in the darkness. If he lacks a satisfactory proposal by midnight, you may begin with his fingers." "Understood, boss." They hauled Sebastian upright, his pleas echoing down the long corridor as they removed him. And just like that, the library was submerged in silence once more. For a moment, Deondre remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the vacant doorway. Then, with his back still turned, his voice cut through the stillness. "You may emerge now, Celeste." Celeste froze, her breath seizing in her lungs. She stepped from the shadows, a tablet trembling in her grasp. Finally, Deondre turned to face her. The monster from moments before had vanished, supplanted by the composed, enigmatic man she had first encountered. "My apologies for the..." demonstration," he said, his voice as smooth as aged whiskey as he poured a drink from a crystal decanter. "I was not aware Mrs. Gable had placed you in here." "You intend to harm him," she whispered, her voice frail and unsteady. Despite her disdain for Sebastian, the raw brutality of the scene was paralyzing. Deondre took a measured sip, his slate-gray eyes holding her captive. "I am merely settling an account in the same manner I concluded ours. Are you going to end his life?" He placed the glass down. In a few deliberate steps, he eliminated the space between them, invading her personal sphere. The warmth radiating from him was palpable. He lifted a hand, his knuckles brushing against her pallid cheek. She flinched but held her ground. "That, my dear, is entirely your decision," he murmured, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "What value do you assign to your former lover's worthless existence?" The library fell utterly silent, the only sound the crashing of the Atlantic waves far below. Celeste was utterly ensnared in the tempest of Deondre Falcone's stare, her thoughts scrambling to process his impossible proposition. "What value do you assign to your former lover's worthless existence?" Celeste's voice abandoned her. She swallowed, fighting the impulse to recoil from the warm, calloused hand still caressing her face. "I do not possess $3 million, Mr. Falcone." A low, dark chuckle vibrated in Deondre's chest. He let his hand fall, though his penetrating gaze remained locked on hers. "I am fully cognizant of your financial standing, Celeste. Your position at Caldwell and Finch is lucrative, but insufficient for the penthouse Sebastian occupied. Your currency holds no value for me." "Then what is it you desire?" she retorted, a spark of her former defiance rekindling. "Why ask me to set a price for him? I despise him. He wounded my pride, but I do not wish for his death." Deondre returned to the decanter, pouring another measure as the amber spirit captured the fading sunlight. "Because, my dear, Sebastian Hayes made a critical error. Theft was not his sole transgression. He intended to launder the stolen funds using forged art authentications, which he planned to conceal within the Caldwell and Finch archives." Celeste felt her blood turn to ice. "What?" "He planned to utilize your credentials," Deondre stated plainly, leaning against the massive desk. "He installed a keylogger on your laptop 2 months before he vanished from your life. The architecture of his betrayal was simple: leverage your credentials to legitimize stolen art, funnel the profits through a phantom corporation, and settle his debt to me. Should federal agents connect the dots, every thread would lead to Celeste Adams, the disgruntled, overlooked appraiser." Vertigo seized her. The room seemed to tilt. Celeste steadied herself against a bookshelf. This wasn't a shattered heart. It was the blueprint for her annihilation. Sebastian had constructed a cage for her, willing to let her languish in prison for his own preservation. "That's a lie," she breathed, yet an icy certainty coiled in her gut, affirming this as Sebastian's signature cowardice. Deondre produced a silver flash drive from his coat, placing it on the desk. "Inside is the forensic analysis of his encrypted drives. See for yourself. His affection was a performance, Celeste. You were a tool, nothing more. The ideal scapegoat." A surge of hot tears stung her eyes, but she willed them away. Her gaze fixed on Shrive, fear transmuting into a cold fury. "Why reveal this to me?" Celeste challenged, her focus shifting to the crime lord. "With this evidence, you could eliminate him. Why am I part of this equation? Deondre moved from the desk, his approach deliberate and menacing. Because his scheme ensnared a competitor of mine, Lorenzo Rossi, who provided the counterfeit art Sebastian intended to use. In 3 days, Rossi hosts a private auction at his Newport estate, a facade for his syndicate to liquidate illicit assets. Deondre halted a mere foot from her, his cologne a dominant presence. I require a specialist, an eye that can discern forgery from 50 feet, a name respected in the legitimate art market, and crucially, a person with a vested interest in orchestrating Sebastian Hayes's ruin. Celeste met his sculpted features. You're offering me a job? Oh, I'm casting you as my fiancé, Deondre clarified, his voice sinking to a conspiratorial murmur. Rossi is aware I have no passion for art. My solo presence would raise alarms, but arriving with a brilliant appraiser, a woman for whom I am ostensibly love-struck, he will see only a man attempting to impress her by acquiring his art. And my refusal? Celeste countered, her pulse hammering. Deondre's demeanor turned glacial, revealing the predator beneath. Then Sebastian's life concludes at the bottom of the Atlantic. Rossi's deception will succeed, and federal agents will uncover the fraudulent appraisals Sebastian planted on Caldwell's network. Your conviction will be assured, Celeste. It was delivered not as a threat, but as an inescapable outcome. The walls had closed in. Assuming I consent, Celeste began, her voice trembling, and I assist in your plan against Rossi, what becomes of Sebastian? He survives, Deondre stated, devoid of emotion. I will seize his every asset, shatter his reputation, and exile him permanently. But his life will be spared. Her eyes flickered from the drive to the lethal figure before her. She was a quiet academic from Connecticut, now bargaining with the devil for a man's future. All right, Celeste conceded. I will play the part of your fiancé. A deliberate, victorious smile claimed Deondre's lips. He advanced, his touch guiding her chin upward, demanding her gaze. Perfect, he murmured. Welcome to the family, Mia Cara. The subsequent 48 hours unfolded as a whirlwind of menacing opulence. Celeste was installed at Falcone Estate's primary guest suite, a space that dwarfed her own apartment, complete with a marble hearth and a balcony viewing a secluded shore. Yet this splendor was underscored by the 2 armed sentinels outside her door. She was both a guest and a captive. That Tuesday, a legion of stylists invaded. Mr. Falcone's standards are exacting, declared Madame Celine, presenting a stunning, backless Oscar de la Renta dress of midnight blue. Your presentation must project immense wealth, inaccessibility, and his absolute ownership. Positioned on a dais, Celeste endured being draped in silks and gems. A Cartier jeweler, flanked by security, unveiled a breathtaking sapphire and diamond collar from a steel case. The Rossi event demands a display of supreme affluence, Mrs. Gable, the somber housekeeper, stated. You will wear this throughout the evening. It signifies Deondre's claim. Celeste examined her reflection. Finding a stranger, her auburn hair was sculpted into a severe, elegant coiffure. Her cosmetics were immaculate, sculpting her features and igniting a perilous glint in her green eyes. She was the very image of a syndicate wife. That night, Deondre summoned her for dinner. They met in a vast hall, illuminated by a monumental crystal chandelier. Deondre sat at the head of a lengthy table, his black shirt sleeves rolled to expose a silver Patek Philippe. When Celeste entered in a sleek black dress, his discourse with his formidable guard, Rocco, ceased. Deondre's gaze consumed her, a flicker of raw possession in his eyes, before his composure returned. He rose, extending the chair to his right. "You are exquisite," he offered quietly as she took her seat. "I am the lure," Celeste retorted, her tone sharp as she arranged her napkin. A low chuckle from Deondre filled the space as he resettled. "Rosie is a viper, yet he honors the old codes. A maidman's companion is inviolable. With me, you are the most secure individual in Rhode Island." The meal was an exercise in palpable tension. They consumed their dinner in a silence thick with unspoken thoughts. She found herself observing him. For a figure of such known ruthlessness, he possessed a refined grace, a deference toward his staff that warred with his violent persona. "You are studying me," Deondre observed over his wine. "I am attempting to comprehend you," Celeste confessed, sensing he appreciated candor. "You are a criminal who enacts violence, yet you are also my shield against federal indictment." "I am safeguarding my capital," Deondre amended, his voice seamless. "Your liberty is a fortunate consequence." "There is more to it than that." His motion stilled. He truly saw her then, and for an instant, his formidable control faltered. Placing faith in monsters is unwise, Celeste, but searching for their soul is a lethal error. Do not cast me as some flawed protagonist. Her reply was preempted by a soft chime. Rocco passed a satellite phone to Deondre, whose expression hardened as he listened. Disconnecting, he slid the device to Celeste. "This is for you," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection. Celeste took the phone with a frown. "Hello? Celeste? Oh, thank God, I need your help." A cold stillness fell over Celeste. The voice fractured by tears belonged to Victoria St. James. "Victoria," Celeste murmured, glancing at Deondre. He merely watched, swirling the wine in his glass. "He has ruined me, Celeste." Victoria wept through the interference. "Sebastian liquidated my family's finances. He faked my father's name on a financial demand. Federal agents raided us today. We have nothing left." A chilling realization washed over Celeste. Sebastian had not only exploited Victoria, he had eviscerated her family's fortune to settle his underworld debts. "Victoria, I am not certain how I can help," Celeste replied, struck by the bitter paradox. Her rival was now pleading for salvation. "He mentioned your records," Victoria sobbed. "He was inebriated, and he boasted that if he fell, he would drag you down with him for the art fraud. I am under investigation due to his actions, and he intends to sacrifice you to the authorities. You must retrieve those files before I am implicated as his accomplice." "His location?" Celeste insisted, her grip tightening fiercely. "I have no idea. He disappeared 2 days ago. Celeste, I implore you." Deondre calmly reached across, took the phone from her, and disconnected the line. He placed it beside his plate. Celeste sat motionless, thoughts racing. "You were aware," she whispered to Deondre. "You knew he was financially destroying her." "I knew he was a cornered predator," Deondre countered, slicing his meat with chilling precision. "I knew he was a parasite seeking a host. Victoria Street James was merely the most affluent option available." "Then why not intervene?" "His affairs were not my concern until my own finances were jeopardized," Deondre replied, his voice glacial. His gray eyes met hers. "Sebastian Hayes embodies a malady within your legitimate society, Celeste. men who commit theft with contracts and shelter behind legal counsel. They disdain men like myself, who dispense our own justice. But which is the greater evil? The one who empties your accounts and abandons you, or the one who halts the thief with a single round? Celeste had no answer. The meticulously constructed reality she had once inhabited was revealed to be a hollow structure decaying from within. And from its ruins emerged Deondre Falcone, presenting a dark, coercive form of deliverance. "Consume your meal, mia cara," Deondre murmured, a possessive fire in his gaze. "Tomorrow we journey to Newport, where you will demonstrate to Lorenzo Rossi precisely whose world you now orbit." The Newport estates were monuments to dynastic wealth, yet Lorenzo Rossi's mansion felt less like a home and more like a citadel cloaked in opulence. As Deondre's fortified Maybach ascended the drive, Celeste observed the colossal limestone edifice. Attendants in stark white livery moved to open doors for an assembly of global power brokers, from financiers to underworld chieftains. "Simply breathe, Celeste." Deondre's voice was a low resonance beside her. She started, her gaze snapping from the scene. Deondre observed her from across the vehicle's opulent cabin. He was clad in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that rendered his formidable physique lethally elegant. In the dim light, the silver scar bisecting his brow was a stark sigil, lending his handsome features a savage quality. "I am breathing," she falsified, her fingers betraying her anxiety against her clutch. "You appear as if you are facing an executioner, not attending a gallery premiere," he observed, a smirk touching his lips. He extended his large, warm hand, enveloping her trembling ones. "Look at me." Celeste's eyes met his intense, slate-gray stare. "Tonight, you are not Celeste Adams, the quiet specialist from Caldwell and Finch's back rooms," Deondre instructed, his voice a deep, anchoring force. "Tonight, you are the woman who commands the undivided focus of Deondre Falcone. You are sacrosanct. Should a man's gaze linger, he forfeits his sight. Should he address you with disrespect, he forfeits his tongue. Is that understood?" This raw, primitive possessiveness sent a strange current of heat through her, a terrifying shield she desperately needed. "I understand," she whispered. "Good." Deondre reached inside his jacket, producing a small black velvet case. He opened it. Nestled on satin lay an emerald-cut diamond of such immense size and clarity, it seemed to emanate its own light. "Your left hand." After a moment's hesitation, Celeste extended her unsteady fingers. Deondre slid the cold, substantial platinum ring onto her finger. Its weight felt like a permanent anchor, pulling her irrevocably into his perilous sphere. "It is time, mia cara," he murmured, his lips pressing a lingering, surprisingly tender kiss to her knuckles. The Maybach halted. Rocco opened her door, and Deondre emerged first, offering his hand to guide Celeste into the crisp, salt-tinged night. The instant her Oscar de la Renta gown touched the crimson carpet, a barrage of flashbulbs erupted from the press enclosure. Deondre remained impassive, his hand settled with proprietary firmness on the bare skin of her lower back, a public brand for all to witness as he led her up the grand marble staircase. The foyer was an assault on the senses, with cascading orchids, the chime of crystal, and the low hum of high-stakes commerce. Servers drifted with trays of Dom Perignon as a string quartet performed Vivaldi. Superficially, it resembled the charity galas Celeste had known, but the underlying atmosphere was fundamentally different. A predatory energy charged the air. These were not merely wealthy individuals. They were apex predators. "Deondre, my friend?" A boisterous voice sliced through the ambiance. A man in a garish, silver-threaded suit approached with outstretched arms. Lorenzo Rossi was shorter than Deondre, with slicked hair and a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Lorenzo," Deondre returned the greeting, accepting the familiar embrace. "A fine gathering. You host the best events for the East Coast's elite." Rossi preened before his attention fixated on Celeste. His eyes widened, his gaze a tangible thing as it swept from her shoulders to the colossal Cartier sapphire at her throat, before settling on her face. "And who is this vision? You have been withholding secrets, Deondre." Deondre's grip on Celeste's waist constricted fractionally, a silent admonition that prompted Rossi to take a half step back. "Allow me to introduce my fiancée, Celeste Adams," Deondre declared, his tone smooth as velvet but with an edge of steel. "Celeste, this is our host, Lorenzo Rossi." "Fiancé?" Rossi stammered, his polished veneer cracking for an instant. He recovered swiftly, seizing Celeste's hand and pressing a damp kiss to it. "A pleasure, Ms. Adams. A distinct pleasure." I was unaware the Falcone family was poised to expand. "We value our discretion," Celeste countered, her voice acquiring a cool, patrician quality that startled even her. "But Deondre insisted I view your collection. He spoke of your talent for singular acquisitions." Rossi's smile tightened. "I possess a certain expertise. In fact, the main gallery is now open. I have an item tonight that will make the connoisseurs in Paris weep. A lost sketch by Raphael." Celeste felt Deondre's thumb trace a slow line on her spine. This was the moment. The snare was being set. "A Raphael?" Celeste arched a perfect eyebrow, her tone laced with academic skepticism. "That is peculiar, given the Uffizi fire in 1762 destroyed the majority of his uncatalogued drawings. A genuine piece surfacing now would be akin to discovering a phantom." A muscle in Rossi's jaw twitched. "I assure you, my authenticators are unparalleled." "That remains to be seen," Deondre said quietly, steering Celeste past the visibly unsettled gangster. "Lead on, Lorenzo." They entered a secured, climate-controlled chamber. At its center, beneath a single, dramatic spotlight, was a small, framed depiction of the Madonna and Child. A cluster of affluent bidders had already formed around it. Celeste approached the display, retrieving a small jeweler's loupe from her clutch. The room fell into a weighted silence as she leaned closer. Rossi observed from the periphery, a new sheen of anxiety on his face. She examined the paper, the aged ink, the very character of the lines. It was a masterful forgery, a work of art in its deception. But to someone who had dedicated her life to Renaissance masters, its flaws were glaring. The paper was artificially aged with tea, a novice's error, and the ink lacked the ferrous corrosion that 500 years would impart. It was the precise counterfeit Sebastian had intended to use her to validate. Celeste drew back her loupe. Her eyes found Deondre's. He gave a minute, almost imperceptible nod. "Ruin him." As Celeste prepared to dismantle Rossi's reputation, chaos erupted at the gallery's entrance. "Unhand me! I must see Lorenzo! Rossi, I implore you!" The crowd parted as Rossi's enforcers dragged a frantic, disheveled man into view. His suit was torn, his face bruised. He appeared not to have slept for days. Celeste's heart seized. It was Sebastian. "What is this filth?" Lorenzo Rossi boomed, his face purpling as his men manhandled Sebastian across the immaculate floor. "Who permitted this refuse into my gallery?" "He bypassed security with the catering staff, Mr. Rossi?" A guard grunted, wrenching Sebastian's arm behind his back. Claimed he had an urgent update regarding the offshore accounts. Sebastian was breathless, his eyes scanning the assembly of mobsters and tycoons like a trapped animal. The arrogant Wall Street predator who had abandoned Celeste 3 months prior was gone, supplanted by a terrified, trembling ruin. "Rossi, you must listen," Sebastian pleaded, his voice fracturing. "The SEC has frozen Hayes Capital. They have seized all my assets. I cannot deliver the payment for the artwork." A ripple of shocked murmurs moved through the room. In the world of illicit art, invoking federal agencies was tantamount to signing one's own death warrant. Rossi appeared moments from executing Sebastian on the spot. "You imbecilic, arrogant whelp," Rossi hissed, advancing on him. "You brought federal attention to my doorstep." "I have the authentication documents," Sebastian cried out, a final desperate gambit to preserve his life. "The papers from Caldwell and Finch. Celeste Adams has affixed her name to them. They prove the Raphael is authentic. You can sell it tonight, launder the funds, and we both walk away clean." Celeste stood, a still figure beside Deondre. Sebastian, in his panic, had not even noticed her. He truly believed his contemptible scheme would succeed. He truly believed he had flawlessly orchestrated her downfall. Deondre remained silent. He merely shifted his stance, his large frame becoming a human barricade before the only exit. He observed Sebastian as a lion might watch a wounded gazelle. "Miss Adams will not be authenticating anything for you, Sebastian." Celeste's voice cut through the room like shattered glass. It was shockingly composed, imbued with a cold authority she had never known she possessed. Sebastian's head snapped around, his eyes widening in disbelief as he finally registered her presence. He absorbed the entire tableau, the designer gown, the dazzling Cartier jewels, and the formidable ring on her left hand. Then his gaze shifted to the man standing behind her, a hand possessively on her waist. Deondre Falcone. The blood drained from Sebastian's face. His knees gave way, and he would have collapsed had the Sards not held him upright. "Celeste," Sebastian choked, his voice a mixture of profound confusion and abject terror. What are you doing here? With him?" "She is appreciating the art," Deondre answered for her, his voice a low, perilous rumble that resonated in the hushed gallery. "Is that not so, my dear?" Deondre glanced down at her, the endearment a stark contrast to the predatory focus in his eyes, which remained fixed on Sebastian. "Yes," Celeste affirmed, redirecting her attention to Lorenzo Rossi, who was now perspiring profusely. "Mr. Rossi, your associate claims I authenticated this piece. I can assure you, such a mistake was not made. In fact, if it had been, my dismissal for sheer incompetence would be warranted." Rossi sputtered. "Incompetence?" attempting to reassemble his shattered authority. "This painting is a certified masterpiece." "It is certified forgery," Celeste countered, her movement toward the canvas drawing every eye. The wealthy onlookers, sensing blood in the water, leaned closer. The drapery on the Madonna was painted by a right-handed artist. Raphael was famously left-handed. The iron gall ink shows no corrosion on the paper, a chemical impossibility for a 500-year-old piece. Furthermore, the paper contains a synthetic compound not invented until 1923. She addressed the assembly with the authority of a seasoned auctioneer delivering a final verdict. This is not a rediscovered Raphael. It is a contemporary fake, likely crafted in a Tuscan cellar within the last 5 years. Its true value is approximately $300, primarily for the antique frame. A profound silence descended upon the gallery. By deconstructing the painting's legitimacy, Celeste had not merely ruined Rossi's evening, she had exposed him as a fraud before his entire criminal infrastructure. Rossi's complexion turned ashen. He scanned the room, met only by the cold stares of the men he had just attempted to defraud. "She is fabricating this!" Sebastian shrieked, struggling against his restraints. "This is revenge for me ending our relationship!" Deondre advanced, his pace unhurried, yet covering the distance with an unnerving velocity. The guards released Sebastian, who crumpled. Deondre seized him by his ruined jacket, hoisting him to face him. "She is doing this," Deondre articulated in a low tone meant only for Sebastian and Celeste, "because she is now a Falcone, and the Falcone name will not be tarnished by filth." Deondre thrust Sebastian backward. He collided with a marble column and collapsed to the floor, weeping uncontrollably. Deondre turned to Rossi, calmly adjusting his cuffs. "Lorenzo, it appears your vetting process is compromised, and you have engaged in business with the charlatan who swindled my family out of $3 million. Deondre, I swear on my life, I was unaware of his deception," Rossi stammered, retreating. "He came to me, claimed an inside source, and guaranteed the provenance was impeccable." "You seem to have misjudged the situation," Deondre stated, his tone glacial. He extended an arm to Celeste. "Our business is concluded. I expect my $3 million, plus a substantial fee for this inconvenience, wired to my account before dawn. If it fails to appear, Lorenzo, I will return, and my fiancé will not accompany me." The unspoken menace saturated the room. Celeste moved to Deondre's side, taking his arm. She did not spare Sebastian a glance as they passed, though his wretched sobs echoed against the marble. She maintained the poise of a stoic Mafia queen until the armored vehicle's doors were securely locked. As the car drove off, her resilient facade finally fractured. Celeste collapsed into the supple leather seating, her hands trembling violently. She closed her eyes, attempting to erase the vision of Sebastian kneeling in disgrace. "Drink," Deondre commanded softly. She looked to see him offering a heavy crystal glass of amber liquid from the vehicle's bar. She accepted it with unsteady hands, taking a large swallow. The spirit's heat traveled down, dissolving the knot of terror in her gut. "You were perfect," Deondre acknowledged, his voice possessing a surprising gentleness. His gaze was no longer that of a man viewing his acquisition. He was looking at her with profound, undeniable admiration. "You dismantled Rossi's entire enterprise without a single shot fired. You shattered Sebastian. You are no longer his victim, Celeste." Celeste gazed at the enormous diamond that still adorned her finger. "Am I not?" she whispered. She had endured the ordeal. Her reputation was intact. But looking into Deondre Falcone's turbulent eyes, she confronted a startling new reality. She felt no impulse to remove his ring. Morning light sliced through the master suite, illuminating a Louis Vuitton duffel on Celeste's expansive bed. On the marble vanity, a Cartier sapphire necklace and a massive diamond ring glittered with a cold, mocking brilliance. The operation was complete. Lorenzo Rossi was financially devastated, and Sebastian's future was utterly annihilated. Her role was fulfilled. She could return to her small Queens apartment, to her quiet life of art scholarship. Why then did the prospect of leaving feel like a vast, suffocating void opening within her? A crisp knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Gable entered, escorted by 2 armed men. "Mr. Falcone requests your presence for breakfast in the solarium." "Yes," the housekeeper announced, her gaze fixed on the packed luggage. "I require a car," Celeste said, her voice a faint whisper as she adjusted her skirt. "My arrangement with Mr. Falcone concluded last night." Mrs. Gable's expression remained unchanged. The guards stood like granite figures. "I am afraid that is not possible, Miss Adams. Mr. Falcone's instructions were explicit. You are not to depart from this estate." Celeste's heart began to hammer against her ribs. Her fleeting fantasy of freedom had just been incinerated. "I am not a prisoner." "You are a guest," the woman corrected, her courteous tone laced with an unmistakable threat. A surge of white-hot anger finally cauterized Celeste's fear. Pushing past the housekeeper, she marched down the grand corridor, ignoring the solarium entirely. She thrust open the double doors to Deondre's study without knocking. He sat at a massive walnut desk reviewing financial documents. He registered her fury with an infuriating calm and dismissed his guards with a subtle wave. The doors clicked shut behind them. "You deceived me," Celeste hissed, planting her palms on his desk and leaning forward. "You promised I would be free. You..." Deondre leaned back, his storm gray eyes unreadable. "I promised you were free from the federal investigation. There is a significant distinction." "I am returning home, Deondre." "You have no home to return to," he stated flatly. Celeste froze. "What are you referring to?" Deondre circled the desk, invading her personal space. His signature scent of rich oud and sheer intimidation enveloped her. "A cornered animal will lash out," he said. "After we departed Rossi's, Sebastian contacted the FBI. He offered them Rossi and the forged Caldwell and Finch records in exchange for immunity. By 6 this morning, federal agents were raiding your auction house." Her face lost all color. "But Arthur Caldwell can verify my innocence." Deondre simply placed a contract on the desk. "Mr. Caldwell is no longer the proprietor. I acquired the company at 4 a.m. My technical team purged every trace of Sebastian's forgeries before the agents arrived. Their search yielded no evidence linking you to the stolen artwork. Your name is completely cleared." Celeste's mind struggled to process the information. He had purchased and dismantled an entire corporation overnight, simply to erase her digital history. "Why?" she managed to ask, her vision clouded by tears. "You had already won. You recovered your money. Why undertake all of this for me?" At that, the mob boss's stoic mask crumbled, exposing the feral, possessive man beneath. Deondre pulled her fiercely by the waist, crashing her body against his. "Because you wore my ring," he growled, his voice a dark tremor. "Because you stood before a room of killers and commanded them with nothing but your intellect." "Because you are mine, Celeste, and I defend what is mine," she retorted. "I don't belong to you," even as her hands instinctively grasped his shoulders. "You do," he whispered, his lips millimeters from hers. "That small, simple world you inhabited, it no longer exists. I burned it down myself to keep you from a prison cell. The only sanctuary you have now is here, with me." Celeste's breath caught. Every survival instinct urged her to flee from this ruthless, formidable man. Yet in his piercing gaze, she saw not a monster, but the only person who had ever truly perceived her. With a sound of surrender, Celeste pressed her lips to his. Deondre emitted a deep, primal groan, lifting her as he consumed her mouth. The kiss was a raw confluence of fear, adrenaline, and a volatile chemistry that utterly consumed her senses. He pressed her back against the desk, his hands weaving through her hair, kissing her until the FBI, Sebastian, and even her own identity faded into irrelevance. When he finally broke away, they were both breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes dark with a savage possessiveness. "You are staying," he commanded, the words bordering on a desperate plea. Celeste looked at the man who had annihilated her life only to salvage it. "I have no other choice, do I?" A slow, predatory smile formed on his lips. "No, my dear, you never did." Her ascent from pawn to queen was a turbulent, disorienting whirlwind. Over the following month, Celeste's existence was completely redefined. She never returned to her modest office. Instead, she was installed as the new director of acquisitions for Caldwell and Finch, conducting business from a fortified office within Manhattan's Falcone Tower. Her days involved commanding priceless artifacts, while her nights were spent in the consuming passion of Deondre Falcone. She had morphed into the underworld sovereign she once dreaded, and to her astonishment, she excelled at it. The entire network deferred to her. The tale of how she neutralized Lorenzo Rossi without a weapon had circulated with mythical speed. When she entered a room, she commanded deference, not merely as Deondre's consort, but as a power in her own right. It was on a Tuesday evening in late November that the final specter of her former life was exorcised. Celeste was relaxing on Deondre's penthouse sofa, sipping Bordeaux and perusing a Sotheby's catalog. The private elevator chimed, and Deondre entered. He appeared weary, but still lethally handsome as he removed his coat. He approached, kissed her forehead, and set a thick envelope upon the coffee table. "It is concluded," Deondre declared, moving to Spar for a drink. Celeste lowered her catalog, her focus fixed on the envelope and its known contents. The trial had ended in a plea bargain. Sebastian Hayes admitted guilt on 3 counts of wire fraud and 2 of embezzlement, securing a 15-year term at Allenwood Federal. The sentence was a heavy one, reflecting the scale of his theft. As Celeste exhaled a breath of profound relief, a final name surfaced. "And Rossi?" "Rossi experienced a sudden, fatal cardiac event on his yacht 3 weeks ago," Deondre stated, his voice devoid of emotion. His unreadable gray eyes met hers. "A significant loss to the sailing world." Celeste understood the unspoken message. In her new reality, the brutal mechanics of power were a subject best left unexplored. Deondre returned to the sofa, taking her left hand where the large Cartier diamond resided. "Sebastian is incarcerated. Rossi is gone. The federal inquiry into Caldwell and Finch is closed." Deondre's thumb brushed against her knuckles. "Every threat has been neutralized, Celeste." Her pulse quickened. "What is the meaning of this?" He produced a slender leather passport holder, placing it beside the envelope. "That represents a first-class passage to any destination, complete with a new identity and an untraceable account containing $10 million, Deondre explained softly. The possessiveness in his tone was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability. You were forced into this world by a contemptible man. My promise was your safety, and I have fulfilled it. You are now entirely free, Celeste. You can leave this moment and never return." Celeste gazed at the passport, the very instrument of escape she had once longed for. It symbolized security and peace. Her eyes moved from the document to Deondre. He watched her, his body rigid, as if anticipating a physical blow. The man who commanded an empire now seemed entirely subject to her decision. "You are offering me an exit," she whispered. "I am offering you a choice," he clarified. "But be certain," he continued, his voice a profound, somber vow. "If you remain, there is no retreat. You become mine until my last day. You will take my name, my conflicts, and my darkness." Celeste observed the ring, the emblem of her connection to him. She contrasted a former life of isolation with the man before her, a terror to the world, but for her, an absolute protector. He had not just destroyed her cage, he had forged a throne from its remains. In a single, deliberate motion, Celeste reached, her fingers bypassing the passport's promise of an empty freedom. She lifted her wine and, after a slow sip, leaned to kiss a faint scar on his jaw. "Deondre," she murmured, "cancel that flight. Commercial flights are invariably crowded," she whispered against his skin. A fractured, guttural sound escaped Deondre's chest. The coffee table was violently shoved aside as he pulled her onto his lap, the passport drifting to the floor, a relic of a dismissed future. His kiss was not an inquiry, but a possessive, triumphant reclamation, a sovereign claiming his queen. The ghost of Celeste Adams had vanished, replaced by a woman who had assessed the abyss and found it to her liking. Later, Celeste stands on a balcony of the Falcone estate, the ocean breeze in her hair, watching the gates that symbolize her beautiful, brutal domain. She felt the cold platinum of the diamond on her hand, its fire a stark contrast to the churning sea. The timid woman from Queens was gone, forged by betrayal into a figure of pure power. She had not merely endured the lion's den, she had mastered its formidable ruler. When Deondre's large, warm hands came to her waist, drawing her against his solid form, Celeste relaxed into his hold. The syndicate's shadow was a vast and merciless entity, but as she gazed upon her dark empire, she knew the night would never hold fear for her again. Model,